What if the war in Ukraine is not just grinding on, but is about to cross a threshold so profound that almost no one, not the soldiers on the front, not the families in the cities, not even the leaders in Kyiv or the policymakers in Washington, is truly prepared for what comes next? Last night, a new and terrifying phase of the conflict revealed itself. The skies over Ukraine roared with the engines of drones and missiles as a coordinated assault targeted the country's critical energy and gas infrastructure. In Poltava and Kharkiv, two regions that have long served as the backbone of Ukraine's energy independence, power plants and gas hubs erupted in flames. These were not isolated incidents. The attacks left millions of Ukrainians in darkness, grappling not only with the loss of comfort, but with a stark threat to their very survival as winter's cold closes in. To put it in perspective, imagine the blackout of New York City in the summer of 1977, or the massive Northeast blackout of 2003. Only here, in Ukraine, the cause is not a technical glitch or natural disaster. It is the result of deliberate, methodical destruction. This is the sixth time just in October that Ukraine's gas infrastructure has come under such systematic attack. The devastation is so severe that Ukraine is now facing a scenario few thought possible even months ago: the need to import vast quantities of expensive foreign natural gas just to keep homes heated and the lights on. For a country fighting for its independence, this is a bitter pill indeed. But the consequences go deeper than smashed pipelines and disabled power stations. Inside Ukraine, the strain is beginning to show in ways that statistics cannot capture. Utility workers, after months of repairs and emergency shifts, are openly voicing exhaustion and fear. Senior officials, usually the face of stoic resilience, are now making public appeals for help and warning of catastrophic shortages. In Western capitals, the response has been muted, more silence than solidarity. Each new attack seems to echo louder in that silence, raising the unspoken question: has the world grown weary of Ukraine's struggle? Look past the headlines, and a chilling picture begins to emerge. These strikes are not random violence. They are precise, relentless, and part of a calculated strategy to cripple Ukraine's ability to fight, to function, and to cohere as a nation. It is a tactic with deep historical roots. During the Second World War, for example, the Allied bombing campaign against Germany sought to destroy transportation networks, power plants, and factories, aiming to sap the enemy's will and ability to continue fighting. In recent decades, we saw similar strategies in the Gulf War and even in the Balkan conflicts, where infrastructure became as much a target as tanks. Ukraine now stands at a tipping point. If you only read the headlines, you might miss the warning signals: a system pushed to its limits, teetering on the brink of collapse. But what unfolds next will not only determine the fate of Ukraine. It has the potential to send shockwaves through global energy markets, crack the unity of the Western alliance, and redraw the map of security in Europe and beyond. To truly understand how we arrived at this explosive crossroads, and why the world cannot afford to look away, we need to dig deeper. We need to unravel the chain of events that set this crisis in motion and expose the hidden battles now raging beneath the surface. Only by grasping these dynamics can we begin to see the contours of what may come next. This is not just a story of missiles and drones. What is unfolding is a coordinated, multi-domain assault on every pillar that keeps Ukraine together. In recent nights, waves of air raids have battered Poltava and Kharkiv, slicing through the country's gas network and plunging major cities, including Kyiv, the beating heart of the nation, into sudden, chilling darkness. The psychological impact of such blackouts cannot be overstated. Consider how, during the London Blitz in 1940, the city's population endured night after night of bombing, with every new wave deepening the sense of vulnerability and fear. In Ukraine, the blackout is not just physical, but psychological, fraying the nerves of civilians and soldiers alike. The scale and accuracy of these strikes leave little room for doubt. Local energy companies such as Naftagaz and DTEK have confirmed that their facilities were directly targeted and forced offline. International observers, ranging from energy analysts to military strategists, concur. These are deliberate, synchronized attacks. Fires have raged for hours, explosions have shattered the night sky, and Ukraine faces not only the loss of critical infrastructure, but also an urgent, high-stakes scramble to import natural gas and electricity simply to keep basic systems running. But these energy assaults are only one layer of a much more complex and dangerous offensive. Almost simultaneously, intense fighting has erupted on the front lines near Pokrovsk and Dobropilya. New axes of attack have opened in the north, stretching Ukraine's already thin defenses even further. Live battle maps, satellite imagery, and a flood of reports from military bloggers all corroborate the same story. Ukrainian units are not merely defending static lines. They are being outmaneuvered, cut off from critical supplies, and, in some areas, trapped in what analysts now refer to as operational kettles or cauldrons. For military historians, this scenario evokes memories of Stalingrad in 1942, when encircled armies faced the dual threats of enemy fire and starvation. This is multi-dimensional warfare at its most ruthless. Each strike, whether against a power grid, a gas hub, or a defensive position, fits into a larger, integrated plan to overwhelm Ukraine from every direction. The goal is not just to inflict damage, but to push Ukraine's military, economy, and political system toward collapse. Ignore the way these attacks interlock, and you miss the true danger. The very lines that keep Ukraine together, be they trenches dug in the earth or the fragile backbone of its state, are stretched to their absolute limit. While the world's attention is drawn to burning infrastructure and shifting front lines, a deeper crisis is taking root. What is unraveling now threatens to shake Ukraine's resistance at its most fundamental level: the cohesion of its society, the morale of its people, and the legitimacy of its government. As pressure mounts, Ukraine's leadership faces a series of impossible choices, each one a fork in the road, with consequences that could reverberate far beyond the country's borders. What happens when every front threatens to collapse at once, and the leadership is left scrambling to keep pace? History offers sobering examples. In 1950, during the Korean War, the sudden collapse of the Pusan perimeter forced the United Nations Command into desperate measures, only barely averting total defeat through rapid reinforcement and bold counterattacks. Today, Ukraine is spiraling into its own perfect storm, one that extends far beyond trenches and artillery duels. In just the past month, at least half a dozen major attacks have struck the country's most vital energy infrastructure. Entire gas extraction sites in Poltava and Kharkiv have been obliterated, with companies like DTEK and Naftogaz openly reporting the destruction. With these assets offline, Ukraine is forced to purchase electricity and gas simply to keep the grid alive and prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. The economic cost is staggering, measured not only in currency, but also in lost jobs and livelihoods. On top of this, staff casualties continue to mount. These are not just numbers on a page, but real people, engineers, technicians, first responders, caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, the battlefield situation is unraveling just as quickly. Ukrainian reserves are being called up at a breakneck pace, often with minimal training and insufficient equipment. These new units are thrown directly into some of the fiercest fighting, especially around Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, where entrenched Russian forces are mounting determined assaults. In these areas, Ukrainian positions are being pinched from multiple directions. Supply lines are either cut or under constant bombardment, making isolation and encirclement not just possible, but alarmingly likely. Commanders are left with only grim choices: risk everything on desperate counterattacks, or attempt perilous retreats while running critically low on ammunition and reinforcements. This mirrors the dilemma faced by encircled Soviet forces at Kharkov in 1942, when a lack of supplies and reinforcements led to disastrous losses. Suddenly, another front ignites in the north, the so-called Bryansk front. With almost no warning, Ukraine's high command is forced to split its already overstretched reserves. Should they hold the battered lines in the south near Zaporizhzhia, or rush to block a possible breakthrough from the north? Every move is a gamble, and every choice leaves another area vulnerable to collapse. This is a classic case of strategic overextension, a trap that has ensnared armies from Napoleon's invasion of Russia to the German Wehrmacht's drive to Stalingrad. On the southern front, Russian offensives have broken through fresh defensive lines, seizing new ground and threatening to drive deeper toward Zaporizhia. The sense of crisis is mounting. Ukrainian units are squeezed from all sides, while time and options are running out. Just as in the closing weeks of the Battle of France in 1940, when German forces broke through at Sedan and encircled entire French armies, the speed and coordination of these attacks leave little room for error. Behind the front lines, political chaos is spreading. New censorship measures have been imposed, banning the reporting of losses, suppressing stories about retreats, and fueling a wave of blame trading between military and political leadership. Reliable information is becoming scarce, and public trust is eroding rapidly. Similar patterns were seen during the last days of the Soviet Union's war in Afghanistan, when official optimism gave way to public disillusionment as the reality of losses could no longer be concealed. Meanwhile, the West is falling silent. There are no bold new pledges of aid, no urgent statements from Western leaders. For the first time, it appears that Ukraine's allies are stepping back, choosing to watch perhaps, rather than act as the crisis deepens. This withdrawal is reminiscent of the international response to the Spanish Civil War, when non-intervention by Western democracies allowed the momentum to shift decisively in favor of one side. This is the feedback loop of instability. Battlefield losses drive economic distress, which triggers political paralysis. And together, these forces threaten to tip the entire system over the edge. If nothing changes, Ukraine risks a true systemic collapse, while international support quietly slips away. The question is not whether Ukraine can endure one more attack, but whether it can withstand the compounding effects of many crises at once. What happens next if these trends continue? The fallout will not end at Ukraine's borders. It will ripple outward, disrupting global energy flows, shaking the confidence of NATO allies, and emboldening authoritarian regimes around the world. Consider how the oil crisis of 1973, sparked by the Yom Kippur War, upended global markets and changed the strategic calculus of entire continents. The coming phase will reveal whether Ukraine can find a path out of this spiral, or if the cracks in its foundation will widen beyond repair. The world is watching closely for the first signals of what comes next. The next moves will not just determine Ukraine's fate, they could redraw the entire security landscape of Europe. Devastating strikes have crippled Ukraine's logistics and energy hubs. Gas extraction and power infrastructure are down across several regions, pushing the country to the brink of operational paralysis. If these attacks intensify, further territorial losses are not just possible, they are likely and could come with alarming speed. For comparison, recall the rapid collapse of Iraqi defenses in 2003 after coalition airstrikes destroyed command and control centers, leaving ground units isolated and leaderless. But the crisis runs even deeper. Inside Ukraine, morale is fraying. Exhausted reserves are sent to the front with little notice, while cracks widen in everyday civilian life. Blackouts swallow entire cities. Families scramble for warmth and fuel. Trust in the government erodes with every new setback. The leadership now battles not only external assault, but an internal crisis of legitimacy as rumors and doubts ripple through society. This mirrors the experience of the United Kingdom during the Suez Crisis in 1956, when loss of confidence in leadership led to rapid shifts in public support and international standing. Internationally, Western resolve faces its toughest test yet. On the surface, support for Ukraine appears steady, but behind closed doors, diplomatic fatigue is spreading. Some Western capitals are quietly reducing their involvement, turning instead to secret negotiations and contingency plans. This shift sends a dangerous message to both Kyiv and Moscow, that the West may be preparing to tolerate outcomes it once rejected, perhaps even pressuring Ukraine toward talks from a position of weakness. We saw similar dynamics at play during the Vietnam War, when shifting American public opinion and diplomatic fatigue led to pressure for a negotiated settlement, ultimately shaping the outcome on the ground. Diplomatic currents are shifting. Reports have emerged of extended discussions between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, while Ukraine's leaders are being left out of critical future forums. These subtle moves suggest a possible realignment, where great powers could attempt to reshape borders without Ukraine's full voice at the table. History is full of such precedents, from the Yalta Conference in 1945, where the fates of smaller nations were decided without their direct participation, to the Helsinki Accords of 1975, which redrew boundaries in Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, the battlefield itself is mutating. Russia is fielding new generation guided bombs and long-range missiles, expanding both the reach and precision of its strikes. Nowhere in Ukraine is truly safe. Not command centers, not supply lines, not cities considered far from the front. Ukrainian defense planners are being forced to abandon old doctrines, as relentless, unpredictable attacks shatter the rules of positional warfare. This shift mirrors the transformation of conflicts seen during the Gulf War, when precision-guided munitions rendered traditional defensive lines obsolete. A new, chaotic phase is emerging, a war of rapid advances, sudden reversals, and frantic political maneuvering. Fixed lines are vanishing, and the pace of change accelerates by the day. It is an era of volatility, where every miscalculation risks a cascade of consequences well beyond Ukraine's borders. One need only look to the sudden collapse of Yugoslavia in the 1990s to see how quickly a stable-seeming situation can devolve into chaos. The risk now is total, not just lost territory, but the collapse of Ukraine's economy, the fracture of its government, and the imposition of a new order by outside powers. For the world, the stakes could not be higher, from energy markets and food security to the credibility of Western promises and the very foundations of international law. The lessons of history are clear. When one nation's collapse is ignored, it rarely ends at its borders. The consequences ripple outward, destabilizing entire regions. As the stakes rise and the chaos deepens, every actor faces urgent, high-risk choices. The outcome of the next few weeks could set the course for years to come. Consider, for instance, how the fall of Saigon in 1975 reverberated through Southeast Asia and beyond, altering alliances and strategies worldwide. System failure almost never arrives as a single thunderous blow. Instead, it emerges quietly, through ignored warnings, overstretched resources, and relentless unseen pressure building until something essential snaps. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 is a case in point. Decades of economic stagnation, military overreach, and political denial finally ended in a sudden, breathtaking implosion. The most urgent lesson is the need for redundancy. When a nation depends too heavily on just a few critical infrastructures, such as a lone power grid or a single railway line, a well-placed attack can unleash devastating, domino-like failures. Backups and alternatives are not luxuries. They are the very foundation of survival. Tokyo's earthquake preparedness is a model example. By building multiple backup systems and rehearsing disaster scenarios, the city has managed to avoid catastrophic collapse during major shocks. Equally lethal is the urge to control the narrative. Suppressing hard truths, blaming scapegoats, or pretending problems do not exist only hastens collapse from within. When those in charge conceal the real extent of damage or dysfunction, they cripple the very systems that might still prevent disaster. The Chernobyl disaster in 1986 stands as a grim reminder. Denial and secrecy only made the crisis worse, turning a local accident into a global catastrophe. Pouring reserves into a crisis is futile if those reserves are raw and ill-equipped. Sending untrained people into chaos, whether on battlefields or into vital civil roles, bleeds morale and transforms temporary setbacks into lasting ruin. True resilience means every backup and every reserve is genuinely trained, supplied, and ready. The Israeli Defense Forces experience during the Yom Kippur War in 1973 demonstrates how rapid mobilization without adequate preparation can lead to initial setbacks, even when eventual recovery is possible. For outside observers and policymakers, this moment must serve as an alarm. Diplomatic strategies can no longer be built on wishful thinking or outdated models. When alliances shift overnight and balances of power teeter, global actors must negotiate from the ground up, using real facts, not hope or habit. The lessons of the Paris Peace Conference after the First World War are instructive. Idealistic plans that ignored realities on the ground sowed the seeds for future conflict. Perhaps the most sobering realization is the speed of change itself. Static thinking, the belief that today's balance will last until tomorrow, has become a dangerous illusion. Anyone who ignores the blaring signals of simultaneous deep shifts across multiple domains risks being swept away when the breaking point comes. The collapse of the Berlin Wall in 1989 caught almost everyone by surprise, proof that tectonic change can happen overnight. These warnings are not just for Ukraine. Any society or system that dismisses early alerts, silences honest feedback, or rests on fragile infrastructure is gambling with sudden, uncontrollable collapse. The lessons of the past are clear. Vigilance, adaptability, and honesty are the only safeguards against disaster. As the headlines keep coming, one question remains. How do you spot the next tipping point before it is too late? What are the subtle signs that a system is about to fail? And what practical steps can leaders and citizens take to prepare for rapid, unpredictable change? In the next section, we will break down the warning signs that matter most and show you how even subtle shifts may reveal the direction of the entire conflict. We will examine real-world scenarios, drawing lessons from past crises and offering concrete steps for building resilience, both on the battlefield and at home. From energy conservation strategies to psychological first aid, from diplomatic recalibration to community-level preparedness, we will explore the tools and tactics that can help Ukraine, and any nation, navigate the storms ahead. The next phase of the war is already unfolding. Will you spot the turning point before it is too late? In times like these, history does not pause for headlines. It is written in the blackout-darkened streets, in sudden breakthroughs, and in whispered decisions made far from public view. While most are distracted by the frozen front lines, those who look deeper can see the gears of change grinding across Ukraine's military, energy, and political arenas. Every hour brings fresh tremors, from the shattered gas fields near Poltava, to the fiery skies above Kharkiv, to the fevered backroom deals in Kyiv. These are not disconnected events. They are signals, signs that the conflict is mutating, shattering old certainties, and exposing vulnerabilities that were supposed to stay hidden. If you rely only on the official narrative, you are already falling behind. The new reality is forged by overlapping crises, where a collapsed energy grid can cripple defenses, and setbacks at the front can topple entire governments. What happens next will not only decide Ukraine's future, but send shockwaves through global energy markets, Western political alliances, and even the information you count on to navigate the world. This is why vigilance is essential now. Missing these inflection points means ceding control, letting others seize the narrative, and living with the fallout of their choices. In a world where the rules can change overnight, the advantage belongs to those who see the signals first and dare to question what others accept. That is why we will keep cutting through the noise, tracking the moves others miss, and decoding the patterns that will shape what comes next. Stay sharp, because in the fog of war, clarity is your only protection.